The city below was a sprawling carpet of light, a silent, twinkling world that belonged to him. From the 52nd floor, the honking cars were silent, and the people were invisible. Alistair Finch liked it that way. Up here, in his penthouse office, everything was quiet, clean, and under his control. The only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioning. At 48 years old, he had built this empire from nothing. He was a king, but a king who lived alone in his castle, surrounded by glass and steel. His world was a schedule. Every minute of his day was planned. Meetings, calls, reports. He didn't have friends. He had colleagues. He didn't have family. He had employees. His heart, once full of dreams, had been slowly replaced by ambition, and then ambition had hardened into a kind of lonely contentment. He thought he was happy. He had convinced himself that the quiet was peace. His desk was a vast, empty sheet of black marble. A single tablet computer lay in the center. As he scanned a financial report, the intercom on his desk gave a soft, electronic chirp. It was his assistant, a wonderfully efficient woman who had been with him for 15 years. "Mr. Finch?" Her voice came through, crisp and clear, but today there was a slight tremble in it, a flicker of something unusual. Hesitation. Alistair pressed the button. "Yes, what is it?" His voice was low and flat, a voice used to giving commands that were always followed. "There's a situation in the main lobby, sir." She paused. "It's a child." "A little girl. She walked right past the main doors and is refusing to leave. She says she needs to see you." Alistair's brow furrowed slightly. A child in his building? It was unheard of. His security was designed to keep the world out, especially the messy, unpredictable parts of it. "And security is unable to handle a child?" he asked, a hint of ice in his tone. "They are unsure of how to proceed, sir. She's very small and very determined. She says she has an appointment." An appointment. The absurdity of it should have made him angry. It was a disruption, an anomaly in his perfectly ordered day. He should have told them to escort her out immediately. But the slight shake in his assistant's voice, the sheer strangeness of the situation, pricked his curiosity. It was a feeling so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. "Very well," he said. "I'm coming down." The elevator ride down was swift and silent. The doors opened directly into the grand lobby, a cavernous space of white marble, polished to a mirror shine. It was designed to impress and intimidate, and it usually did. And there, in the very center of that vast, empty space, stood the problem. She was so small. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. Her hair was a messy tangle of brown, tied back in a ponytail that was already coming loose. She wore a simple blue dress and a worn pair of sneakers. In her hand, she clutched a small purple backpack. She looked like a lost sparrow in a palace. 2 large security guards stood a few feet away, looking down at her with a mixture of confusion and helplessness. They were trained to handle angry protesters or pushy reporters, not a tiny girl who looked like she might blow away in a strong wind. As Alistair approached, his expensive shoes making no sound on the marble, the little girl turned, her eyes, a wide and serious blue, locked onto him. She didn't look scared. She looked resolute. She took a step forward, her small shoulders squared. "Are you Mr. Finch?" she asked. Her voice was clear and high, cutting through the silent lobby. "I am," Alistair said, stopping a few feet from her. He crossed his arms, not in anger, but because he didn't know what else to do with them. "And who are you?" "My name is Lily," she announced. She didn't offer a last name. She just stood her ground, looking up at the tall, imposing man who controlled billions of dollars. "And what can I do for you, Lily?" he asked, his tone softer than he intended. "You've caused quite a stir." Lily took a deep breath as if she had practiced this. She swung her backpack around, opened it, and dug inside. After a moment, she pulled out a piece of paper, crumpled and folded many times. It was a page torn from a business magazine. It was his own face, staring back at him from a cover photo, looking stern and successful. "I saw you," she said, holding up the picture, "at the doctor's office. My mommy was busy filling out forms. I read the article. It says you are a very important man. It says you are in charge of everything here." Alistair glanced at the picture, then back at her. "That's correct." Lily nodded, a quick, serious little nod. She then reached back into her backpack, her small hand digging deep. This time she pulled out a fistful of money. It was not a lot. It was a collection of crumpled bills and a few coins. A $5 bill, several ones, and a lot of quarters and dimes. She had it all clutched tightly in her small fist. She stepped right up to him, her eyes filled with a desperate hope that was painful to see. She held out the money. "Here," she said, her voice trembling just a little now. "It's $50. I counted it. It's all my money from my piggy bank." Alistair looked at the offered money, then at her face. He was completely and utterly lost. "What is this for?" he asked, genuinely confused. Lily's bottom lip quivered for a second, but she steadied it. She looked him straight in the eye, and she made her proposal. "Here's $50, she repeated, pushing the money towards him. "I just need a dad for one day." The air went out of the room. The security guards, who had been trying to look professional, now stared openly, their mouths slightly agape. The lobby, always so quiet, was now absolutely silent, as if the whole building was holding its breath. Alistair Finch, the man who had faced down hostile takeovers and international crises without his pulse quickening, felt his world tilt on its axis. A dad for a day. It was the most ridiculous, the most illogical, the most heartbreaking request he had ever heard. His first instinct was to refuse, to explain that he was a very busy man, that he had meetings, that he didn't do things like this. He could buy a company with this hour. He could sign a deal that would change an industry. But the words died in his throat. He looked at the $50 in her small, outstretched hand. He saw the hope in her wide blue eyes, a hope so fragile he felt that one wrong word from him would shatter it into a million pieces. He saw the crumpled magazine photo she still held in her other hand. She hadn't chosen a kind-looking teacher or a friendly neighbor. She had chosen him, the very important man from the magazine, because she thought he was the best candidate for the job. The ice around his heart, ice that had taken decades to form, gave a loud, internal crack. He didn't take the money right away. He slowly knelt down, bringing himself to her eye level. The marble floor was cold against his knee. "One day?" he asked softly. Lily nodded, her eyes glistening. "Just one day. Next Saturday. It's the father-daughter dance at my school. Everyone else is bringing their dad. I don't have one." The simple, honest statement hung in the air between them. It wasn't a plea for pity. It was just a fact of her life, and she had found what she thought was a solution. Alistair looked at the money in her hand. $50. It was less than he spent on a cup of coffee. It was nothing. But to her, it was everything. It was her entire fortune, offered up for a single day of normalcy, for a chance to not feel left out. He reached out his hand, not to take the money, but to gently close her small fingers back around it. "You should hold on to this for now," he said. Lily's face fell. The hope in her eyes began to dim, replaced by the crushing weight of disappointment. She started to pull her hand back, but then Alistair spoke again. "I don't need your money, Lily." A single tear escaped and traced a clean path down her dusty cheek. He gave a small, awkward smile, a gesture his face had almost forgotten how to make. "But I do accept the job." The transformation on her face was instantaneous. The sadness vanished, replaced by a dazzling, brilliant smile that seemed to light up the entire gloomy lobby. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated joy. "Really?" she whispered, as if she couldn't believe it. "Really?" Alistair said, and he found that he meant it. "It's a deal." He stood up, feeling strangely light. He had no idea what he had just agreed to. He had no idea how to be a dad for a day. He looked at the two stunned security guards and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The crisis was over. The king had left his castle, and he had made a promise to a sparrow. And for the first time in a very long time, Alistair Finch felt something stir inside him. Something that felt a little like purpose and a little like fear, but mostly like the beginning of an unexpected adventure. The elevator ride back to his office was silent, but the quiet felt different now. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of being alone. It was a heavy, thinking kind of quiet. Alistair stood perfectly still, watching the numbers light up one by one. He could still see the little girl's face, the way her eyes had lit up when he said yes. He had just agreed to the most bizarre and completely unbusinesslike deal of his entire life. When the doors opened onto his floor, his assistant was waiting. Her face was a mask of professional worry. "Sir, is everything resolved?" Alistair walked past her towards his office. "It is resolved," he said, not stopping. "Please clear my schedule for next Saturday." His assistant blinked, her pen hovering over her digital notepad. "Next Saturday? Sir, you have the quarterly review with the Asian division that morning, and the charity gala preview in the evening." "Move them," Alistair said, his voice firm as he stepped into his office. He paused at the door and looked back at her. "The entire day is blocked off. Personal matter." He closed the door before he could see the look of stunned surprise on her face. A personal matter. He never had personal matters. He walked over to his desk but didn't sit down. He just stood there looking out at the city. The little girl, Lily, had given him a small piece of paper before he left the lobby. It had a phone number written in a looping, careful handwriting and the name Clara underneath. Her mother, he assumed. He was supposed to call to arrange the details. His first instinct was to treat it like any other business arrangement. He would have his assistant call, set a time and a location, and handle the logistics. But something stopped him. This felt different. This wasn't a contract negotiation. This was a promise made to a child in a quiet lobby. It felt personal. He picked up his private phone, a simple device very few people had the number for. His finger hovered over the buttons. He felt a nervousness he hadn't felt since he was a young man making his first big sales pitch. He took a deep breath and dialed the number. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered. She sounded warm, but there was a layer of tiredness underneath. "Hello?" "Hello?" Alistair said, his voice more formal than he intended. "May I speak with Clara?" "This is Alistair Finch." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a long silence. "Oh," she finally said, her voice much quieter now. "Mr. Finch, Lily told me what she did. I am so sorry. She can be very determined, and she just took off after school. I had no idea. Please, just forget she ever bothered you. It was completely inappropriate." Alistair was taken aback. He had expected many reactions, but not this flood of apology. "She wasn't a bother," he said, and he was surprised to find that he meant it. "She was very persuasive." Clara let out a soft, sad sigh. "She saved that money for a year. She's been talking about that dance since the flyer came home. She didn't want to be the only one." Alistair felt a strange tightness in his chest. He thought of his own childhood, of being the odd one out, the one who didn't fit in. He understood that feeling all too well. "I told her I would do it," Alistair said simply. "And I keep my promises." Another silence. He could almost hear her thinking, weighing the strangeness of the situation. "Mr. Finch, you don't have to. I understand you're a very busy man. It's too much to ask." "You didn't ask," he reminded her gently. She did. "And I agreed. So, if it's all right with you, I would like to fulfill the contract." He heard a small, choked sound on the other end, maybe a laugh, maybe a sob. "The contract," she repeated, her voice soft. Okay then. The dance is at the school from 6 to 8 on Saturday, but maybe you could come a little earlier to, meet properly? And so Lily can get used to you?" Alistair's mind raced. What did one do with a child before a dance? "Of course," he said, his business brain kicking in, searching for a solution. "Perhaps I could pick her up at 4. We could get something to eat beforehand." "That would be lovely," Clara said, her voice warming up. She would like that very much. They agreed on the details, and as Alistair was about to hang up, Clara's voice turned serious again. "Mr. Finch, thank you. You have no idea what this means to her. She's a good kid. She just misses having a—" "Well, After he hung up, Alistair stood by the window for a long time. The city was still there, but it looked different. It wasn't just a collection of buildings and assets anymore. Somewhere out there in one of those buildings was a small apartment where a little girl was probably bursting with excitement because a stranger had agreed to be her dad for a day. The week passed slowly. Alistair went to his meetings and made his decisions, but his mind kept drifting. He found himself staring out the window, not at the skyline, but at a small park he could see in the distance. He wondered if Lily played there. He realized he knew nothing about children. What did they eat? What did they talk about? On Thursday, he did something he hadn't done in 20 years. He left his office in the middle of the day without telling his assistant where he was going. He walked several blocks, feeling strangely anonymous among the crowds, until he found a small, quiet toy store. The bell above the door jingled as he walked in. A friendly woman asked if he needed help. Alistair, a man who could command a room of hundreds, felt completely lost. "I need a gift," he said, "for a 7-year-old girl." The woman smiled and showed him many things. Dolls, building sets, art supplies. Everything felt either too babyish or too complicated. Then, tucked away on a shelf, he saw a small, beautifully crafted wooden music box. It was simple, with a small dancer that spun when you opened it. It played a soft, tinkling melody. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet and kind of magical. It reminded him of Lily's hopeful smile. "I'll take this," he said. On Saturday, Alistair felt a nervous energy he couldn't shake. He dressed not in one of his usual dark suits, but in a pair of smart trousers and a simple, comfortable blue shirt. He looked at himself in the mirror. He didn't look like a powerful CEO. He just looked like a man. It was a strange feeling. He had his driver take him to the address Clara had given him. It was a nice, ordinary neighborhood with old trees and small, well-kept apartment buildings. It was a world away from his sterile penthouse. His driver looked at him with a question in his eyes, but Alistair just said, "Wait here. I'm not sure how long this will take." He walked up to the building and pressed the buzzer for apartment 3B. His heart was beating a little too fast. The door was opened by a woman with kind eyes and a warm, if slightly nervous, smile. She was younger than he expected. "Mr. Finch? I'm Clara. Please come in." The apartment was small and full of life. There were drawings stuck to the refrigerator with colorful magnets. A worn, comfortable-looking sofa was covered with a throw blanket. It was the exact opposite of his own home. It was lived in. It was warm, and then from behind Clara, Lily appeared. She was wearing her best dress, a simple yellow one, and her hair was neatly brushed. She stared up at him with those huge, serious blue eyes, clutching the strap of her small backpack. "Hello, Lily," Alistair said, kneeling down again, just as he had in the lobby. "Hello," she whispered. She looked him up and down, taking in his casual clothes. "You look different. So do you," he said. "You look very nice." A small smile touched her lips. She stepped forward and, without a word, took his hand. Her small, warm fingers wrapped around his. It was such a simple, trusting gesture. Alistair felt his breath catch in his throat. No one had held his hand in a very, very long time. He looked up at Clara, who was watching them with a soft, almost sad expression on her face. "We'll have her back by 8:30, he said, his voice a little rough. "Take your time," Clara said softly. "Have fun." And with that, Alistair Finch, the solitary tycoon, walked out of the warm, messy apartment, holding the hand of a little girl who had hired him, leading him into an afternoon he could never have planned for. The little girl's hand was warm and trusting in his. It was a strange feeling. Alistair was used to shaking hands, firm, quick grips that sealed a deal. This was different. Lily's small fingers held onto him as if he were an anchor in a busy world. He felt the weight of that trust, and it was heavier than any business contract. He led her to the car, a long, silent vehicle that looked out of place on the cozy street. His driver, a man who had worked for him for a decade, raised his eyebrows in surprise but said nothing, simply holding the door open. Lily looked up at the tall car, then at Alistair. "It's so big," she whispered. "It's just a car," Alistair said, unsure of what else to say. He helped her inside, and she slid across the smooth leather seat, her small feet not touching the floor. She looked around the quiet, cool interior with wide eyes like she was in a spaceship. Alistair got in beside her. The door closed with a soft, expensive thud. The silence inside was deep. "So," Alistair began, feeling more nervous than he had in any boardroom, "where would you like to go for food?" Lily thought about it, her brow furrowed in serious concentration. "Do you like pizza?" she finally asked. Pizza. It was such a simple, ordinary thing. Alistair couldn't remember the last time he had eaten pizza. His meals were usually prepared by a private chef or eaten at quiet, fancy restaurants. "Pizza sounds perfect," he said. He gave the driver the name of a quiet, family-owned place he had passed sometimes, not one of the loud, bright chains he assumed children liked. The car pulled away from the curb, and they drove in silence for a few minutes. Lily kept looking out the tinted window, watching the world go by. "Do you have any kids?" she asked suddenly, turning her gaze back to him. The question hit him like a physical blow. It was so direct, so innocent. "No," he said, his voice a little tight. "No, I don't." "Oh," she said, processing this. "Do you have a dog?" "No." "A cat?" "No." "What do you do for fun?" she asked, genuinely curious. Alistair almost laughed. For fun? He worked. He read reports. He exercised in his private gym. He didn't have fun. He realized how empty his answer would sound. "I work," he said, feeling a strange sense of shame. Lily nodded, as if this made perfect sense. "My mom works a lot, too. She's a nurse. She helps sick people get better. It's a very important job." "Yes," Alistair agreed softly. "It is." The pizza place was small and warm, smelling of baked dough and tomatoes. It was bustling with families. There was noise and laughter, the clatter of plates. Alistair felt everyone's eyes on them for a second. The tall, serious man in his nice clothes and the small girl in her yellow dress. He felt a sudden urge to leave, to retreat back to his quiet world. But Lily's hand was still in his, and she was pulling him towards a small wooden booth in the corner. "This one!" she declared. They sat down. A young waiter brought them menus. Lily didn't need one. "We want 1 cheese pizza, please," she announced. She looked at Alistair. "Is that okay?" "That's fine," he said, handing the menus back to the waiter. When the pizza arrived, hot and bubbling, Lily's eyes lit up. She watched, fascinated, as Alistair carefully served a slice onto her plate. She didn't pick it up right away. She looked at him, then at the pizza, then back at him. "Aren't you going to blow on it?" she asked. "Blow on it?" "So it's not too hot," she explained, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. So Alistair Finch, who commanded a global empire, leaned over the table and gently blew on a slice of cheese pizza for a little girl. She watched him seriously, then nodded in approval. "Now you can eat." He watched as she picked up her slice, the cheese stretching into long, gooey strings. She took a big bite, and a smile of pure happiness spread across her face. It was a messy, joyful sight. He took a bite of his own slice. It was simple and it was delicious. For the first time in years, he was actually tasting his food, not just eating it. "So," Lily said between bites, her chin smudged with a little tomato sauce. "What do we do at the dance?" This was the heart of the matter. The reason for it all. "Well," Alistair began, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin, "I suppose we dance. Do you know how to dance?" she asked. He thought of the formal charity galas he was forced to attend, the stiff, polite swaying to orchestral music. "Not the kind of dancing you probably mean," he admitted. "That's okay," she said cheerfully. "It's easy. You just move your feet. And sometimes you spin. I can show you." The idea of this 7-year-old girl teaching him how to dance was both absurd and strangely wonderful. "I would like that," he said. As they finished their pizza, Lily's chatter filled the space between them. She told him about her best friend at school, about the book she was reading, about how she wanted a hamster, but her mom said no. He listened, really listened. He didn't think about the time or the next item on his schedule. He just listened to the simple unfolding story of her life. He reached into the pocket of his coat, which was folded on the seat beside him. He pulled out the small, wrapped box. "I brought you something," he said, feeling suddenly shy. "A small gift for our outing." Lily's eyes went wide. She looked at the box, then at him, as if checking to see if he was serious. Carefully, she took it and unwrapped it. When she lifted the lid of the small box and saw the wooden music box inside, her breath caught. She lifted it out as if it were made of glass. "It's a music box," Alistair explained softly. "You open it." She slowly lifted the lid. The tiny ballerina inside began to spin, and the soft, tinkling melody filled their little corner of the noisy restaurant. Lily stared, completely mesmerized. She didn't say a word. She just watched the dancer spin and spin, a look of pure wonder on her face. When the melody finished, she gently closed the lid. She held the box close to her chest and looked at him, her blue eyes shining. "It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she whispered. "Thank you." In that moment, Alistair felt a success deeper than any he had ever known from closing a business deal. He had made this small, serious girl smile with wonder. It was a better feeling than seeing a profit graph go up. He paid the bill, and they walked back to the car. The sun was starting to go down, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily held the music box in one hand and his hand with the other. "Are you ready for the dance?" he asked her as the car moved through the now softly lit streets. She nodded, a little of her earlier nervousness returning. "Yes, but will you hold my hand when we go in?" Alistair looked down at her, at the small face looking up at him with so much hope and a little bit of fear. He thought of his empty, silent apartment. He thought of his life of schedules and solitude. And he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he would hold her hand for as long as she needed him to. "Of course I will," he said. "That's part of the job." The car stopped in front of the elementary school. The building, usually quiet in the evenings, was now buzzing with life. Colorful paper streamers and balloons were tied to the front gates. They could hear the faint, thumping beat of music from inside. Through the windows of the gymnasium, they could see swirling lights and moving shadows of people dancing. Lily's small hand tightened in his. She had been quiet for the last few minutes of the drive, just holding her music box and looking out the window. "It's loud," she whispered, her voice almost lost under the music. Alistair looked down at her. He could feel the fine tremor in her hand. She wasn't just nervous. She was scared. The brave girl who had marched into his skyscraper was gone, replaced by a child afraid of walking into a room full of people. "We don't have to go in," he said softly. "We can just go back home." She shook her head quickly, her ponytail swinging. "No, I want to go. I don't want to go in alone." He understood that feeling completely. He had spent a lifetime walking into rooms alone, and he had never liked it either. He squeezed her hand gently. "You're not alone. We have a contract, remember? I'm with you." He opened the car door and helped her out. Together, they walked towards the school entrance. The closer they got, the more she seemed to shrink, trying to hide slightly behind his leg. The gymnasium was an explosion of color and sound. A disco ball spun from the ceiling, scattering little spots of light across the walls and floor. A fast, cheerful song was playing, and the floor was packed with fathers and daughters dancing, spinning, and laughing. It was chaos, wonderful, happy chaos. For a moment, they just stood at the edge of the room, two outsiders looking in. Alistair felt every pair of eyes in the room turn towards them. He saw the curious looks, the whispers behind hands. He was a stranger here, an unfamiliar face in a room full of familiar community. Then a woman with a warm smile and a volunteer badge walked up to them. "Well, hello there. You must be Lily, and this must be your dad?" she said, her tone friendly. Lily's grip on his hand became vice-like. She looked up at the woman, then at Alistair, her eyes wide with panic. Alistair felt a protective instinct rise in him, fierce and sudden. He looked at the woman and gave a small, polite smile. "I'm a friend of the family," he said smoothly. It wasn't a lie, and it felt like it protected Lily from having to explain. "Wonderful," the woman said. "Well, find a spot and join in the fun. There's a photo booth in the corner and plenty of snacks over by the stage." She moved away to greet another family. They were left alone again at the edge of the dancing crowd. "It's very bright," Lily murmured, looking at the swirling lights. "It is," Alistair agreed. He looked around and spotted a few other children who were also hanging back, looking shy. He saw a table with cups of punch and plates of cookies. "How about we get a drink first?" he suggested. "We can just watch for a little bit." She nodded eagerly, relieved to have a simple task. They made their way to the snack table. He poured her a small cup of red punch and handed her a sugar cookie shaped like a star. She took it carefully, her eyes still scanning the room. They found two empty chairs along the wall and sat down. For a few minutes, they just watched. They saw a father lift his giggling daughter high into the air. They saw another one holding both his daughter's hands and swinging her in a circle. They saw a group of girls dancing together in a circle, laughing uncontrollably. Lily watched it all, silently eating her cookie. She wasn't sad, just observant, taking it all in. The fast song ended, and a slower, gentler song began to play. It was a classic melodic tune that Alistair actually recognized. The dancing on the floor changed. The wild movement settled into gentle sways. Fathers held their daughters close, the little girls resting their heads on their father's shoulders or standing on their feet. Lily looked at them, and then she looked down at her lap. A single fat tear rolled down her cheek and landed on her yellow dress, leaving a dark spot. Alistair's heart ached. He didn't know what to do. He was a man who solved problems with money and power, but he had no power over this. "Lily?" he said softly. "What's wrong?" She shook her head, not looking at him, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Nothing," he waited, giving her space. The slow music swirled around them. After a moment, she spoke, her voice thick with tears she was trying to hold back. I don't know what that feels like." She nodded towards a little girl who was peacefully resting her head on her father's shoulder as they swayed. "It looks safe." That word, safe, broke something inside him. He thought of his own childhood, which had been many things but never truly safe. He looked at this brave little girl who had hired a stranger because she wanted to feel, for just one night, what it was like to be cared for. He knew then that the job wasn't just to show up. The job was to be present. He stood up and held out his hand. "Well," he said, his voice a little rough, "we can't have that. A good employee completes all his duties, and I believe dancing is on the list." Lily looked up at his offered hand, her tear-streaked face full of surprise. "Really?" "Really," he said. "But you'll have to show me how, remember? You said you would." A tiny, wobbly smile appeared on her face. She slipped her small hand into his again and let him lead her onto the dance floor. They found a small open space near the corner. Alistair felt incredibly awkward. He was too tall and she was too small. He didn't know where to put his hands. "It's easy," Lily whispered, guiding him. "You put your hands there." She placed his hands on her shoulders. Then she put her small hands on his waist. "And then we just sway." So they swayed, back and forth in a small, gentle rhythm. It wasn't a fancy dance. It was just a slow, simple movement. At first, Lily kept her head down, looking at their feet. But as the song continued, she slowly, tentatively, rested her cheek against his shirt. Alistair froze for a second, then relaxed. He could feel the slight weight of her head, the trust in her small body as she leaned against him. He continued to sway, looking down at the top of her head, at the messy brown hair of her ponytail. The loud music, the bright lights, the other people, it all seemed to fade away. In that moment, it was just the two of them in their quiet, slow-moving bubble. He had spent his life building walls to keep the world out. But this small girl, with her $50 and her desperate hope, had found a way through. Holding her, he didn't feel like a CEO. He didn't feel powerful or important. He just felt needed. And for the first time, that felt better than being powerful. The song came to an end. The spell was broken. Lily lifted her head and looked up at him. Her eyes were dry now, and they were shining with a new, happy light. The fear was gone. "You're a good dancer," she said. Alistair smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You're a good teacher," he replied. The next song was fast again, and this time, Lily was ready. She grabbed his hands, her earlier shyness vanished. "Now for the fast one, come on!" And Alistair Finch, the solitary tycoon, found himself being pulled into the middle of the dance floor by a 7-year-old girl, about to dance in a way he had never danced before, feeling more alive than he had in 20 years. The fast song was a whirlwind of energy. Lily pulled him into the middle of the dance floor, and for a few minutes Alistair forgot who he was. There was no billion-dollar company. There was no lonely penthouse. There was only the thumping beat and a little girl laughing as she showed him how to move. He was clumsy at first. his movements stiff and awkward. But Lily didn't care. She spun in circles, she jumped up and down, she did a funny little shuffle with her feet. She was pure, joyful energy. Slowly, Alistair began to relax. He stopped trying to dance correctly and just moved to the music. He swayed, he tapped his foot, he even did a small, hesitant spin that made Lily giggle. He watched the other fathers. They weren't professional dancers either. They were just men happy to be with their daughters. They did silly dances, they made funny faces. They were present. Alistair tried to copy them. He bent his knees and did a little wiggle. Lily's laughter rang out, clear and bright, and it was the best sound he had ever heard. When the song ended, they were both out of breath. Lily's face was flushed and happy. "You're getting better," she announced, as if she had been teaching him for years. "Thank you," Alistair said, pretending to wipe sweat from his brow. "It's hard work." They spent the next hour like that. They danced to fast songs and slow songs. They went to the photo booth and put on silly hats, making funny faces as the camera flashed. They drank more punch and ate another cookie. Alistair felt a lightness in his chest he hadn't felt since he was a boy. He was living completely in the moment, and it was a feeling more intoxicating than any business success. But as the evening was winding down, a familiar voice called out, "Lily!" They both turned. Clara was standing at the entrance to the gym, a soft smile on her face. She had come a little early. Lily ran to her mother, her yellow dress swirling around her. "Mommy, we danced! And we had pizza! And he gave me a music box. And he's a good dancer." Clara hugged her daughter tightly, her eyes meeting Alistair's over Lily's head. Her expression was complex, gratitude, warmth, and something else he couldn't quite name. A deep old sadness. "The dance is almost over," Clara said, smoothing down Lily's hair. "I thought I'd come see the end. I hope that's all right, Mr. Finch." "Of course," Alistair said, walking over to them. It was a wonderful evening. They stood together at the edge of the dance floor as the final song played, a slow, gentle melody. Lily leaned against her mother, tired but content. The three of them watched the other families, a quiet understanding settling between the adults. When the music stopped and the lights came up, it was time to go. The magic of the evening was over. They walked out of the school and into the cool night air. The parking lot was full of families saying their goodbyes, fathers buckling tired daughters into car seats. They reached Clara's small, practical car. Lily was almost asleep on her feet, clutching the music box to her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Finch," Clara said, her voice sincere. "You have no idea what you did for her tonight." "It was my pleasure," Alistair replied. And he meant it more than he had ever meant anything. Truly. He knelt down one last time in front of Lily. "Good night, Lily. I had a very nice time." Lily's eyes were heavy with sleep, but she smiled. "Good night," she whispered. Then she did something that surprised him. She let go of the music box with one hand, wrapped her small arms around his neck, and gave him a quick, tight hug. "Thank you for being my dad for today." Then she turned and let her mother help her into the car. The hug was over in a second, but Alistair felt it linger. He stood up feeling a little stunned. Clara gave him a last long look. There was that sadness in her eyes again, mixed with a strange urgency. "Mr. Finch," she began, her voice dropping so Lily couldn't hear. "What you did tonight, it was more than kind. It was important. There's something I need to tell you. About Lily, about her mother." Alistair felt a cold trickle of apprehension. "Her mother? You mean—" Clara shook her head, a pained look on her face. "Not here, not now. She's too tired, but could we meet? Tomorrow, perhaps, for coffee? It's important." The happiness of the evening suddenly felt fragile, like glass that was about to crack. He looked at the little girl in the car, already drifting to sleep, her head leaning against the window. He looked at Clara's worried, earnest face. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him, that this was not over. "Of course," he said, his voice quiet. "Just tell me when and where." She gave him the name of a quiet cafe near her apartment for the next morning. Then she got into her car and drove away, the red taillights disappearing into the night. Alistair stood alone in the empty parking lot. The silence felt different now, It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy with questions. The joy of the dance, the feeling of Lily's small hand in his, the sound of her laughter, all of it was now mixed with a deep, unsettling worry. He got into his own car. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror.
Home, sir?
Alistair didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the dark, silent school. He could still feel the ghost of a small hug around his neck. He could still see the deep sadness in Clara's eyes. Home, he finally said, but as the car pulled away, he wasn't thinking about his penthouse. He was thinking about a little girl who had lost her mother. He was thinking about Clara's words, about her mother. A puzzle was forming in his mind, pieces from a past he had tried to forget. The face of a woman he had loved long ago, a love he had walked away from to build his empire, flickered in his memory. The solitary Tycoon was driving back to his empty home, but his heart was no longer solitary. It was now filled with the echo of a child's laughter and the weight of a coming truth he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. The one-day contract was over, but the story, he sensed, was only just beginning. The cafe was the kind of place Alistair would normally never notice. It was small and cozy, with the smell of fresh coffee and baked bread. The chairs were mismatched, and soft music played in the background. He arrived early and chose a table in the quietest corner, his back to the wall. He felt like he was waiting for a verdict. He saw Clara walk in. She looked tired, as if she hadn't slept much. She saw him and gave a small, nervous wave before coming over and sitting down. She ordered a simple coffee and then just held the warm mug with both hands, not drinking. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice low. "Of course," Alistair replied. His own coffee sat untouched. The easy comfort from the day before was gone, replaced by a heavy silence. Clara took a deep breath, as if gathering her courage. She looked him straight in the eye. "Mr. Finch, Alistair, the story I have to tell you is difficult. It's about my sister." Alistair felt the world slow down. "Your sister?" "Yes," Clara said, her eyes glistening. "Her name was Eleanor." The name hit him like a physical blow. Eleanor! It was a name from a different life. A name he had locked away in the deepest part of his memory. The woman he had loved more than anything. The woman he had left behind because he was young and foolish and thought his career was the only thing that mattered. The pain of that choice had shaped him into the man he was today. He couldn't speak. He just stared at Clara, and for the first time, he saw it. The slight curve of her smile, the shape of her eyes. She looked like an older, sadder version of the girl he had once known. "Eleanor was my older sister," Clara continued, her voice trembling. "She was brilliant and kind and so full of life. She talked about you all the time. She never really got over you." Alistair found his voice, but it was a rough whisper. "What? What happened to her?" Clara looked down at her hands. "A car accident. 8 years ago." It was quick, they said. "She didn't suffer." The finality of those words settled over him. The ghost from his past was not just a memory. She was gone. Truly gone. A wave of grief, old and new, washed over him. He had always carried a quiet hope, a faint "what if" in a corner of his heart. Now that hope was extinguished. "I'm so sorry," he said, the words feeling completely inadequate. Clara nodded, accepting his sympathy. But she wasn't finished. She looked up and her gaze was direct and unwavering. "There's more, Alistair. When Eleanor died, she left behind someone." The air in the cafe felt too thick to breathe. The pieces were crashing together in his mind with a terrible, deafening logic. Lily's serious blue eyes. The way she had looked at him with a trust that felt ancient. The strange, deep connection he had felt to her from the very beginning. "Lily," he breathed. The name, a prayer, and a question. Clara's tears finally fell, tracing quiet paths down her cheeks. "Yes, Lily is Eleanor's daughter. She is your granddaughter." Time stopped. The sounds of the cafe faded away. Alistair felt the chair beneath him, the table in front of him, but he felt disconnected from everything. The little girl with the $50. The child who had hired him. The one who had hugged him good night. She wasn't just a stranger. She was his blood. She was the living, breathing piece of the only woman he had ever loved. A piece of himself he never knew existed. All the money, the power, the skyscrapers, it all crumbled into dust. In that moment, none of it mattered. The only thing that was real was the truth now hanging in the air between them. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice broken. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Pride," Clara said softly. "Heartbreak. You chose your work, Alistair. She found out she was pregnant just after you left. She was devastated. She decided to raise the child on her own. She was a wonderful mother. So strong." She paused, wiping her tears. "After she was gone, I took Lily in. She was my family. I promised Eleanor I would always take care of her." Alistair thought of Lily's life. The small apartment, the worn-out sneakers, the $50 that was her entire fortune. While he was sitting in his tower of glass and steel, his own family was struggling. The guilt was a physical pain in his chest. He thought of the dance, of Lily resting her head against him, saying it felt safe. She had been seeking from a stranger what was her birthright. He looked at Clara, really looked at her. He saw the weight she had been carrying alone. The grief of losing a sister, the responsibility of raising a child. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice raw. Clara gave him a watery smile. "That's up to you, and up to Lily. I didn't tell you this to force you into anything. I told you because she deserves to know her family. And you deserve to know her. What you did for her yesterday, that wasn't you being a kind stranger. That was you being her grandfather. You felt it, didn't you?" He had. He had felt a connection so deep and immediate it had scared him. Now he understood why. "I want to be in her life," Alistair said, the certainty solid and clear in his heart. "Not with money, not with gifts. I want to be there, if you'll allow it." "If she'll allow it." Clara reached across the table and placed her hand over his. It was a simple human gesture that broke down the last of his walls. "She already has," she whispered. Weeks turned into months. The change in Alistair Finch's life was not a loud, dramatic one. It was a quiet revolution. His penthouse was no longer sterile. A small pink backpack was often slung over one of his designer chairs. A child's drawings were stuck to his refrigerator with magnets. There were board games on his coffee table. He didn't try to replace Clara. He was simply Grandpa Al, a new, wonderful part of her life. He picked her up from school sometimes. He helped her with her homework, which often meant he was learning alongside her. They went back to the park, and this time, he knew how to push her on the swing properly. One Saturday afternoon, he was in his garden, a new, messy, and wonderful space he had created on his terrace. He was showing Lily how to plant sunflower seeds. Her hands were covered in dirt, and she was laughing as she patted the soil into a small pot. Clara was watching them from a chair, a book in her lap, a peaceful smile on her face. Lily looked up at him, her face smudged with soil, her blue eyes, Eleanor's eyes, shining with happiness. "When will they grow, Grandpa Al?" "Soon," he said, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "We just have to be patient and take care of them." He looked at this little girl, his granddaughter, and then at Clara, the sister of the woman he had loved. He looked around at his home, now filled with light and laughter and life. The solitary Tycoon was no longer solitary. His empire was still there, but it was no longer his legacy. His legacy was right here, with dirty hands and a bright smile, teaching him about patience and love and what it truly means to be a family. He had spent his life building a fortress, and a little girl with $50 had given him a home.